arrived, and a quorum of members present, I'll call the Finance Committee meeting for Tuesday, June 25th, 2019 to order. The first item on our agenda is to approve the minutes of our previous meeting from 6/11 of 19. Copies of the minutes were in the packets. Any revisions or corrections needed? If not, a motion to approve the minutes would be appropriate. Motion by Martins. Is there a second by Smith? Members in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? None are opposed. Minutes are approved. Item number 2 is discussion and possible action on renewal of the parking lot lease at 3rd and McClellan Streets. And you've got a copy of that agreement in your packets. That, I think, parking lot has had the same arrangement and the same use for a long time, right? Where no changes in terms or anything? No. Okay. Do we have a motion to approve the renewal of that parking lot lease? Motion by Smith. Is there a second? Second by Martins. Further discussion or questions? Seeing none, members in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? None are opposed. That motion carries. Item number 3 is discussion and possible action regarding a budget modification for the police evidence storage facility. Marianne, if you want to walk us through that one?
Yes, so when we budgeted for this project, after that time, we had hired an engineering firm, MTS, to help the police department put together specifications for the project. Bids were open this morning at Public Works, and they came in higher than expected. And so I think the police department is recommending that they go back and rebid the project. They're going to look at the costs as compared to the engineer's estimate and then rebid either for a fall start or for a start in 2020.
Okay.
So we currently have this in our borrowing plan with $500,000 as the amount that we would be issuing for. And we're going to consider preliminary resolutions at the July 9th finance meeting, so that number would be in there. And my recommendation is we keep it in there because we can pull it out all the way up to sale date.
Okay.
If they decide at that point that they're going to wait until 2020. But we can't put it back in. Once we pull it out, we can't, or if we had done the preliminary resolution without it in, you can't add and increase your debt at
Sure.
the final resolution. You can just reduce your debt. So my recommendation when we do the preliminary resolution is to keep the $500,000 in there. And then if the project gets delayed to 2020, it's just pull it out.
Then we
on
would just
sale
borrow
date.
less when we sell the debt and then
Yes.
hold it over as a commitment for 2020's
Yes.
borrowing?
Yes.
Okay. What are your thoughts on that, committee? Seems like a reasonable approach. Okay. Do we have a motion then to approve that modification? Motion by Smith. Is there a second?
Well, there's no modification
Oh,
necessary. Sorry.
Okay. So you don't need voting action tonight then?
Nope.
Okay. Then that's an informational item, so we won't take action on that one
Yep.
then. That speeds everything right up. Okay, and then we've got, item number 4 is discussion and possible action regarding a budget modification for bus procurement. And you've got a memo from Marianne in your packets about that, and we've got the transit director with us.
Yep.
Come on up, Greg.
Good afternoon, everyone. So the council authorized the submission of a grant application and passed a resolution making a local share commitment for that procurement. And since then, the project hasn't quite played out, the grant process hasn't played out quite as we anticipated. It kind of got caught up between the changeover in administrations. So the project schedule originally was to have award in October, and then we anticipated issuing a PO to the bus vendor in December. And I projected my costs based on the producer price index through December. Well, we got notices of intent to award, but no actual award until around the 1st of April. And since then, I've applied the producer price index. I've learned more about the state's procurement process. We intend to procure off a state contract that's been established for large vehicles. And it's a little more complex and time-consuming than I originally anticipated. So I've projected out through September, which would give us enough time to navigate that process. But the bottom line is, due to the producer price index increasing, the cost of the vehicle has gone up considerably outside of what we had originally anticipated. So we're looking at a gap for 4 buses of just over $60,000, as you can see in your exhibit. I'm hesitant to proceed to have the mayor sign the agreement because we haven't identified how that will be funded. If you recall, the VW settlement calls for the local share to be paid for through receiving less in shared revenue payments over a 10-year period. So this amount has nothing to do with shared revenue payments. This would be a local commitment we'd have to come up with outside of that process. So the question is, where are those funds? Do we have them? Should this be put off into the next CIP process, which would probably cause the price to continue to increase according to the producer price index? So I'm here today to see if there is a local solution now where we could proceed with the project, work with the DOT on navigating their procurement process and locking in this price.
Sure. Well, 60,000 over the spread of 4 buses really is not a giant amount of money. I mean, given the fact that we would have new buses, and the ones that we have were used to begin with and have, you know, way more miles than they ever should have had on them. If we were, well, I guess we'd have to look at some fund sources and see, do we have savings from anywhere else so far in 2019 that we could utilize those funds for this? Or is it an option to maybe source some of that underneath motor pool? Do we have an option for, it's a vehicle, so.
That would be an option. I do think in the capital projects budget this year, we could probably look at different savings line items and in total come up with the $60,000. I could have that analyzed in the resolution. If you approved it coming out of the capital projects from savings, we could have that resolution expanded to outline where the savings actually were for the July 9th council meeting, or we could bring it back again.
To that meeting, and we could
Yeah.
go to council the same night if we needed to.
We could do that.
I mean, the committee would already know that they'd be getting results from you, and then it would be on for council. We'd have our final answers then if it feels like this is kind of a chicken and an egg conundrum. If you don't have vehicles that work, you can't have a transit system that works. I mean, this is kind of a, you know, I'm actually surprised the amount is this low if there's a local share to fund 4 new buses. So,
Well, and I'd like to point out that we've gone through the manufacture of the vehicle and all of the subcomponents, and we've already taken out the nicer windows that are standard with our bus. The seats are not what we would normally purchase. We've pulled out the external graphics on the vehicle so that, you know, we'll try to fund those with our operating budget. So we've done all of the things that we can do. And some of these things, quite honestly, I'm surprised the state considers options. There are 3 floor heaters in there. This is the Midwest. Those are standard on our bus procurements, and those are options in the eyes of the state. So those are to be funded locally. So some of this is just kind of strange, but nonetheless, it is what it is.
okay. All right. Well, what are your thoughts, committee? Could we direct Mary Ann to analyze some cost savings from other areas and then maybe check and see if there's any options in the motor pool fund?
I
Go
have a
ahead, Dennis.
question. This problem is brought by the state dragging its feet, or I'm not sure I'm clear on what is causing this $60,000 shortfall.
Well, the contract that WISDOT has with the vendors held the original price that was established in 2017 through October of 2018. After that, the price for each line item, the base bus and then all of the options, increases by a producer price index. The original schedule was established by the Walker administration, and he didn't get to it, he didn't make any awards until the next administration. So the awards did not actually occur until around the 1st of April. So since then, the producer price index has been applied to all 4 vehicles, the base price, and then each of these subcomponents that we have to pay on our own. and that makes up the 60,000.
Okay, so basically, if the state would have done what the state should have done, we wouldn't be having this conversation, is that correct?
Well, not quite all of it. So there are some, the bottom half of the exhibit, this financial exhibit, shows some subcomponents. Those we have to fund on their own. They're not eligible under the VW grant or the state's bus contract. So I knew originally I'd have to come back and we'd have to find about $20,000. So that's not unexpected. The rest of it is the producer price index doing its thing.
Okay, thank you.
So that's
You're welcome.
two-thirds of it's the cost of waiting. Okay,
Yes.
all right. So if the committee is willing, we could direct Mary Ann to go back and analyze cost savings from other projects since the year is half over, see where we're at, if we've got that funding in-house that we could divert, and then see if we have any option in motor pool. I don't know that we have an option to, we've not done transit in the motor pool before, ever, and, that fund is kind of stretched too, but if we could check, and then maybe let us know on July 9th.
Yep.
And if we find the money, then we could take it to council that same night and then keep Greg moving along if,
And I'd like to point out that the expenditure will not happen until the bus is delivered. So that's a process that may take 12 to 18 months. It'll take at least 12, but probably more like 18. So what I'm looking for is a commitment so we can, commit to the grant
Get 'em
agreement.
ordered, yep.
And get them going.
okay. All right. What do you think, committee? Are we good with that? Have Mary Ann look for some fund sources that are alternatives and come back
Well,
on the 9th?
If this is not going to happen for 18 months, can't we just try to put it in the upcoming budget or so on?
Well, you have to somehow come up with a budget document that makes a commitment to the project. We have to commit, I have to submit a revised budget now and sign the grant agreement that commits us to the funds. So there has to be a commitment
You have to sign that with the bus company, the vendor, or with the state?
with the state.
Okay, so in our budget, if we would modify our budget, or if we would approve this expense, and we would commit to funding that expense as of 1/1 of '20, in the 2020 budget cycle, would that be a sufficient action? Because then, when we go through our budget process for 2020, which starts next month, we would have a prior commitment that would go into the money that we've already committed for the 2020 budget, and that would then be part of our, cost to continue, basically. Is that a better option? Would that work, or?
So then, like a resolution that says the city will fund this in 2020?
I think a resolution will suffice.
Okay.
I will double check that. But I just wanted this body to be aware, and I don't think the mayor's going to sign the agreement unless we've identified some source and can make that commitment.
That makes sense. So if we may approve a resolution that commits to spending that 60 in 2020, and then work it into our natural budget process, knowing that we already have our eye on project savings to
Yeah,
do it
well,
with.
we'll have to do that because Mary Ann will otherwise have to go back and that's going through her desk drawers looking for cash so we can pay for this and so
Right.
on. But, yeah, we have to do this. We have to have a mass transit system. There's too many people that depend on it, so.
Right,
Gotta
right.
have the buses.
Should we then, since we're going to build it into the budget, do you want to just approve it tonight then? And she can look for project savings anyway to fund it with when we get to our budget process next month. Okay.
think, yeah.
Do we have a motion then to approve the expense and then
I'll make
fund it
that-
for the
I'll make that mo-
2020?
Yeah, I'll make that motion to.
Okay, we have a motion by Martins. Is there a second? Second by Smith. Further discussion and questions? Seeing none, members in favor signify by saying aye. 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 Opposed? None are opposed, so that motion carries.
Thank you
All right.
very much.
Thanks, Greg. Okay, so that then brings us to item number 5, discussion and possible action regarding budget modification for the demolition of the Great Lakes Cheese Riverfront facility. And you'll see some materials in your packets. There's been a number of bids received for that demolition. And it looks like we have contemplated that cost into our project on that site. Let's see, do you have anything, Mary Ann, you want to walk them through the?
Sure, so they put an RFP out for demolition. They got a series of bids back. There was a committee that reviewed those, and they made the recommendation to go with DNR Recycling. They liked this proposal because, number one, DNR has a really strong record of recycling. old construction material, and so they were going to be able to forego landfilling quite a bit of it. They also provided a proposal on the removal of the concrete foundations, which many of the companies did not do, and they felt that it was good to have one contractor handle all of that. The other thing DNR said is if they can recycle more than is proposed, so they're expecting to save about $97,000 for recycling. If they're able to get more than that, they will share that excess with the city. To accomplish this, we would do a budget modification. We added a little bit more to the budget because there may be some asbestos testing and some other minor things that need to be accomplished, like utility termination or whatever.
Sure.
So this would then cover all of the costs. I, for one, am very pleased that we're getting at this right away because, you know, those things, what can happen if you don't take care of these right away, and we've experienced this before, is there will be others that will raid the recycling opportunities on that facility, and pretty soon it costs you a lot more to get rid of the building because there are people who will break in,
So anything
steal
in
your
it that's
copper.
recyclable would already be
Yeah,
gone?
Yeah,
Okay.
so the quicker we can get this turned around, and that was one other point of DNR is that they will be able to start the project as soon as possible. I think we're waiting for that property to transfer hands. That document or effort is in the attorney's office right now, and so as soon as that is done, DNR will be able to start.
To
So
start?
they
Well, and if they can
met-
reduce our tipping fees at the landfill,
Right.
that's huge.
Yes, so they really met a lot of the goals that we had.
Okay. And this then expense would be earmarked for TID 12.
Yep.
Do we have any further questions for Mary Ann? If not, is there a motion then to approve the demolition contract? Motion by Martins, is there a second? Do we have a second to get the motion on the floor? Okay,
It on the floor, but
Okay.
I'm not voting for it. I've always had a problem with this project, and this is kind of Wausau Chemical 2.0. One of the big deals that when we moved the water plant, is it's in the floodplain. Well, this is in the floodplain too. I had maps pulled. So what I'm saying is, we've already invested, I don't know if Mary Ann has a figure of what we've spent on this project so far.
all of the riverfront redevelopment that's occurring, though, has been constructed at a level above the floodplain, right? The site has been brought up, I thought.
I don't know, this has to be right on the level with where the water plant is. The water plant is in the floodplain, this has got to be in the floodplain. Well, maybe Eric can tell us if it's in the floodplain. From the maps I looked at, it sure looks like it is.
It could, in the maps that you had indicated is the 500-year floodplain, which the 500-year can be developed. It cannot be developed with a new water plant. The DNR will not allow it. Private development can develop in a 500-year floodplain. They cannot develop in a 100-year floodplain.
So what, is the water plant in a 100-foot?
What's that?
Is the water plant in a 100-foot, or a 100-year floodplain?
No, the water plant is in a 500-year floodplain, which the DNR will not allow a new facility to be built in any sort of floodplain, regardless. So.
Okay, but if we tear this down, aren't we looking to put something new there, or are we just going to clear this?
But it
Not a
will be-
water plant, though.
But it won't be a water plant. It'll be a
Okay.
private development, which they're eligible to.
Okay, so they'll let new private development, but they won't let new municipal development.
With regards to drinking water, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I think the other thing with, with this facility, I mean, it's essentially 2/3 of it is a refrigerator. And so, if we don't take care of this facility right now, then we'll be paying the electrical costs and the utility costs for this facility. Obviously, it housed cheese and those types of things, and the discussions I've had with the people that manage the facility is, right now, Great Lakes Cheese is keeping it cold, because if they warm it up and shut the AC off, they don't know, the cheese spores and all those things, they might get mildew and mold and everything else growing in there. So,
Well, yeah, I'm unsure. Who owns this property right now?
Great Lakes Cheese.
Okay, so, and they're still storing cheese in it, right?
No.
No.
It is.
But they're just
empty.
running in the refrigerator just because that, they think that's a good idea?
Right. Yep.
Okay,
And so, the question, and it's not inexpensive to keep that place cool. So I think the fact that DNR is able to come in and demo this facility, within a very reasonable time from when we take ownership of it, as Mary Ann said, the sooner we can shut everything down, it's less cost to the city, and the sooner we can take it down.
well, when is this property gonna change hands?
It's in the attorney's office right now. We expect sometime by mid-July.
Okay, and
At
then we're
least that's
going
the
to
last I heard.
spend another $200-some thousand to tear this place down,
That's correct.
all right?
But it sounds like the committee is planning to release an RFP on it yet in July for some of that area.
For
along-
redevelopment?
Yes, for redevelopment. So you'd be already looking for new tax base to recover that with.
Well, yeah, I know, we're always looking for new tax base, but
Sure.
sometimes it's years out.
Yep, it happens.
Our problem is, we'll spend this money, we've already spent a ton of money already, even with what we've done out in the industrial park for our good friends at the cheese place. And, I understand that they have employees, and that's great, and they're supposed to be adding some of the new employees, and I hope we're monitoring that to make sure that happens. I don't even know how they're, maybe you can tell us, how is the new facility coming? Have they moved yet? Are they in the process of moving, or what's going on out there?
Yeah, they're fully operational.
Okay, they're fully operational out there.
They're also advertising for workers. I've heard a few ads for them. They're looking to add workforce. So
Okay.
recently, I've heard come work here type advertisements, so.
Well, I still think the deal stinks, because we'll develop this, we'll spend a ton of money, and then some developer will come along and whisper sweet nothings in our ear, and then we'll give them to him for $1, and we'll hope that someday, before the second coming, we'll break even on this project,
Well, as
And,
long as what they build is worth $20 million, that it might resonate. You just never know. I mean,
Yeah.
once they release the RFP, we'll see who responds, but.
I think
Thank you.
the important thing is you already authorized us to take ownership of the property. So if we, you have staff working on that and so you can't get out of that obligation. Sure. So council as a whole authorized for the city to take ownership of that property. So, you can either have us pay the utility bills every month, and insure it and do all of those things, or we can tear it down. And, the utility costs do add up. We've paid, utility costs at the federal building when that was being redeveloped. We're paying it at Sears right now. And again, as I indicated, when we took possession or continued to own the old incubator, we found that people came in because the building was unprotected, and they stole all of the items within the facility that had value from a recycling standpoint. So all of a sudden, there was no copper left in the facility.
Well, that's kind of what
And-
happened to that FedEx building on the riverfront, too.
Yeah.
By the time it got to be anything, it was just an empty shell.
Right.
With
And so I
squatters.
think that, we need to, it's in our best interest to move quickly on this to prevent having to pay for the utility costs and to lose that recycling gain that you have.
Why would we be running the cooler for a building we're going to tear down?
As Eric indicated, if you stop, I think we've all, maybe
Well,
not
the whole place will
experienced, but
mold.
when your refrigerator doesn't operate, it starts to mold. And for something that size, having cheese in it, who knows? What kind, you could, all of a sudden, it could be a hazmat area then.
If
And-
it breeds black mold, it is.
Yeah.
Well, good, that could join Wausau Chemical, which is probably going to be as a
Oh,
hazmat area,
geez.
too.
Let's hope not.
well, we don't
Let's
need that.
certainly hope not. Let's hope not. Okay, so with a motion and a second on the floor, further discussion or questions? Seeing none, then members in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Members opposed? Record one no, so then that item passes 2-1. That brings us to item number 6, which is discussion and possible action regarding a budget modification for boat launch repairs and park maintenance. And you've got a request in your packets for $18,000 for that purpose.
So the Parks Department, as the resolution indicates, they were working on, or had in their 2019 capital plan to work on Gilbert and Schofield Park boat launches. With the drawdown of water, that has exposed additional work that needs to be accomplished. In addition, they've found some work that they'd like to do to the Barker Stewart Island Bridge, again, because of the water being down. And they did have another capital budget, the Parks River Edge Trail budget that they've been carrying over for a number of years. So they would just take the money out of that and transfer it to their general parks capital budget to accomplish these maintenance projects.
Okay, so we'd be using money they already have.
Yes.
All right, is there a motion then to accept that transfer? Motion by Martins, is there a second? Second by Smith. Further discussion or questions? Seeing none, members in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? None are opposed, that motion carries. Item number 7 then is discussion and possible action regarding the May 2019 general fund reports.
It
And
feels, yeah.
Got those reports in the packets, if you want to just walk us through those quickly?
Yep, it feels like we just did this.
It does, doesn't it?
Yeah, so I think as we mentioned at the last meeting, revenues, there are a number of areas that are looking particularly strong. Interest income is one of them, and our permit sales for building improvements is another one. You can see that permits at this point are 201,000. Our budget was 254, and last year at this time we were at 149. So we've already surpassed last year. From an investment income standpoint, we are at about 745,000 in investment income, and our budget was 328,000. So there again, we're looking very strong in the revenue. At the last meeting, we had talked about our expenses. The one area of concern was Public Works winter maintenance, and you had directed that I go back and take a look at that. We are working on that, but we haven't had time to complete that task. Public Works right now has a number of vacancies, and so that will help with savings, though I think they're looking to contract out some work, which will offset some of that savings, but we will have that ready for you
Okay.
in future
Yeah, I think
meetings.
they had mentioned maybe crack sealing to get done before the cold comes again, so, okay. Anybody have questions for Mary Ann about the report? If not, we'll place her report on file. Okay. And that brings us up to item number 8, which is discussion and possible action regarding an amendment to the parking lot agreement with Compass Properties. And you've got some documentation in your packets about that.
We just adopted on June 11th a resolution that would authorize a 3-year parking agreement with Compass for 60 stalls on the rooftop of the Jefferson parking ramp at its going rate of $5. And that was necessitated by the nationwide lease. Mark came in after that had gone to council and said that they wanted to move from the rooftop to the 5th floor. If you recall, at a previous meeting, we had adjusted that rate, the 5th floor rate, down to $15 per month. And so now they're asking if we can change this agreement to reflect $15 on the 5th floor rather than $5 on the rooftop.
Okay. And then increase the number of stalls also to
Yes,
66?
From 60 to 66, yes.
Okay. All right. And that brings in a little more revenue than the prior arrangement,
Yep.
which is a positive. Does anybody have questions for Mary Ann about the agreement or the amendment? If not, is there a motion to approve the amendment? Motion by Smith, is there a second by Martins? Members in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? None are opposed, that motion carries. Item number 9 is discussion and possible action on the city's right to repurchase the property at 350 South 86th Avenue. You'll see there's a letter in the packets along with the documents to waive our right to repurchase. Anytime property in the business campus comes available, the city has the right to acquire and and use that property as it sees fit. But if we have no plan to reclaim the property and we want it to be, to continue to be used for these type of purposes, historically, we've been waiving off our right to repurchase. We've got Chris Schock with us if you have questions for him about this project. Should we bring Chris up? If not, is there?
Yeah, otherwise,
Oh.
what's there now, I guess? Or is it? They didn't say what the manufacturer was or anything.
Do you know? I think the attorney's office was handling this.
I think
Or
so.
the request
I-
came
I-
from the
It did come from the attorney's
Mm-hmm.
office, yes. And I don't know in the right to repurchase if it says what the current use is. I'm just looking to see.
Yeah, I think, if I recall, I believe this is the.
Oh, this is Corey. Because the letter, thank you.
Is this
Corey
Composite
Thorson.
Envisions?
Yeah.
Yes.
Because he's moving to a different site, right? In
Correct.
the same area.
He's going to, yeah, we expect him to make a proposal to move, but this is actually his first building, which is on the hill on.
Okay.
Off of 86th, his original building, which the city helped incubate for him. And then he expanded and moved from there to Development Court. And then he's been on Development Court now for about 5 years, and we do expect him to make a proposal shortly to move to the business campus expansion
To
area.
somewhere bigger yet.
So
Yeah.
he has a purchaser. He's had it listed for a while. He now has a purchaser for the original building, which is,
So this is just a smaller building as part of his overall facility that he's,
yeah, this is
Okay.
it's a relatively small building, and it's a small
Okay.
industrial
Do
building.
we know what the intended reuse is yet from the Easkers?
I don't know. Yeah, it's a small building. I assume another small manufacturer will use it, but.
Okay, well, the city has signaled no intent to have a use for it either.
Correct. Yeah, we
And no
have no
money to buy it
intent.
with, so.
Yeah, we have no
and
intent
Then
to
that's
buy
why
it.
we waive these off, is if we have no desire to re-own it, then we let it continue for someone else
Of
who can
course.
use it, so,
It's not a very, yeah, we have no use for it. So.
okay. Do we have a motion then to waive our right to repurchase so that this sale could continue? Motion by Martins, is there a second? Second by Smith. Further discussion or questions? Seeing none, members in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Aye, opposed? None are opposed, that motion carries. Item number 10 is discussion and possible action on a budget modification for an ADA facilities review. That's our last item.
Yep. So CIVMIC had encouraged all of its members to conduct facility ADA audits. The council authorized, I guess, a creation of a staff committee made up of the various departments to go through and figure out how they wanted to accomplish that. An RFP was written, and the Board of Public Works opened those RFPs, and this committee selected ACT Services to provide that service of $18,410. There was no budget developed as in anticipation of this project. I talked to the city attorney's office. Their legal budget, their professional services legal budget, it does have money available, so you could make a budget modification out of their line item for professional services legal. Or if you didn't want to do that, you could take money out of the self-insurance fund and use that for funding the $18,410.
Okay.
So it's really your
The legal
choice.
budget savings would be because they haven't yet filled that staff position we approved, right? Or-
No, it's
Oh,
for contracted legal
Oh,
services. So,
okay.
every year we have a budget, and that's what they use to pay when we have tax litigation or
Oh,
slip
sure.
and falls or things like that, until they go to the insurance company, but, yep.
Okay. Given the fact that we are only halfway through the year and we're involved in a few projects that require outside counsel, I guess I'm reluctant to pull it out of there because we may end up finding that we'll need to infuse her budget with cash again if we require, or, I mean, even going through Board of Review, if we end up with some denials, we could end up with tax litigation yet. As far as the self-insured fund and its health, would we take that out of the reserve?
Yeah.
And what's the current health of that fund? I think that had a decent amount in it. In fact, I think we
Yeah.
had slowed down on putting more in, hadn't we?
Yeah, it's doing pretty good. We had a tough year last year with workers' comp claims, but, in general, I think the self-insurance fund is healthy, so I think, it could certainly afford the $18,410.
Would this be an
And really,
appro-
it was a recommendation of our insurance company. That's why I thought that might be an alternate funding source.
Would this be an appropriate use of the self-insurance fund then, or?
I think, as I said, that's why I thought perhaps it was, because our insurer
Has recommended the audit.
Right, and it, should, if there are some areas that we need to improve ADA accessibility, it's going to prevent future litigation or claims,
Liability.
right, and reduce our risk.
And this is an audit that is done rather infrequently. I think once you have an analysis of all facilities and you know what their, either assets or deficiencies are, you wouldn't have to repeat that audit process for quite some time, right?
I know, Eric, you're on that committee, right?
Yeah, so I wrote the RFP for this, so really the only time that you'd have to relook at facilities is if the ADA requirements have changed. I think we're still using the 2010, or, yeah, I think so. And so, at some point in the future, if those change for any reason, we might have to look at the facilities, but typically facilities now, when we put in new facilities, they're all ADA compliant, especially in the parks and the buildings and things as appropriate, so.
And this would get us an analysis of all the buildings we have currently, right? I mean,
It
this
does,
is-
it does with the buildings that typically we have the public in.
Yes.
Like, yeah, so like our water and sewer facilities, we're not going to do, because, typically we don't invite the public in there. We do
Right.
have those, but it's not open to the public, so. But then this will also do buildings at the city parks
Okay.
in different areas, so.
Sure. All right. It sounds like a decent amount of analysis for 18,000, if we can get an assessment of where we need to go. Because then too, with capital projects, if we know what the needs are, we can start to pre-plan a little bit for some of that. And then if we plan any renovations or whatever, we'd know kind of what we're up against. Certainly makes sense. What are your thoughts, Dennis? Go ahead.
Have we had a lot of litigation in the past from ADA situations?
I guess since I've been with the city, I don't think so. I mean, most of what we see at the Board of Public Works is, pretty typical things, people hitting potholes, claiming our potholes are damaging
Slipping on
cars. or-
sidewalks and stuff like that?
Right, yeah, general slips and falls.
We've had a fair amount,
on
we've
our
had people
sidewalks.
request special accommodations though before, which we've been able
We
to
have.
accommodate. A lot of that
Yep.
always is for hearing deficiencies, but we did get a few complaints when the mayor was first elected in 2016. We ended up building that
Oh, yeah.
wheelchair parking space out front because the only wheelchair or handicap parking was in the back.
Right,
And then to traverse the sidewalk and the ramps, there was complaints about that. And we did end up having to make that compliant and extensive curb renovation and that out front.
correct.
So,
I mean, I mean, we've had some complaints on sidewalks throughout the city for that, Some of the old sidewalks that were put in the 40s and stuff, didn't have the curb ramps. And as we reconstruct streets and do different things, and if they do have ramps, sometimes they're not always compliant, so we make those renovations at that time, but, yeah.
okay. Do we have a motion then to approve this audit to take place and to fund it from the self-insured fund? We have a motion from Martins. Is there a second? Second by Smith. Further discussion or questions? Seeing none, members in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? None are opposed. That motion carries. So that's the end of our agenda for tonight. Motion to adjourn would be appropriate. Motion by Smith. Second by Martins. Members in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? No one ever wants to stay. We'll stand adjourned. Thanks, everyone.
And then at the next meeting, we're going to try to have a short finance so that we can have a committee of the whole.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.